Hello and welcome to our PRBI Live. I'm your host Tarunjit Ratan, and today we take on political PR. This vertical has gone through a massive change in the last decade. When you look back, you can actually identify certain individuals who've changed the game and opened up the possibility of a new way to function in this space and possibly thrive. To discuss this today, we have with us Fred Russo, the Executive Director of Botica Butler Raudon from New Zealand. So I'm going to refer to it as BBR Partners, right? And New Zealand as a country has set a new benchmark for political communication. As all of us know, the President Jacinda Ardern has really set new benchmarks for it, and I believe the entire world is fascinated by it. New Zealand as a country has also drawn a lot of attention because of its policies, politicians in power, and governance. But how much of it was attributed to PR? Did PR really help bring in transparency in this segment? How did they do it? Fred is going to spill the beans on political PR from his country for us. A little more about Fred before I add him on. He has spent 12 years in New Zealand working with Fortune 500 companies, IT businesses, local startups. He's led or managed programs in technology, done some interesting work in the political arena as well. He's originally from the US of A, and he moved to New Zealand from Southeast Asia in 2006 and holds a Bachelor's of Science in Public Relations and minor degrees in Sociology, Criminal Justice from Northern Arizona University, a one-time international athlete. He's a former NCAA springboard diver and a circus manager. Welcome to the circus, right? So let's add him on. Um, hey, Fred, how are you doing?
Good, Taranji. Good. How are you doing?
Great. So, PR to sociology to criminal justice to diver to circus manager, you have had a hell of a career. What turned your attention to PR? Let's start with that.
Well, I guess a lot of it comes through my parents. I mean, they were both school teachers and they both insisted I get an education. So I did. I just happened to be a springboard diver, was reasonably good in high school, and got to go to Northern Arizona and joined their Division I springboard diving team. While I was trying to be an athlete, which was a decent little career while it lasted, I did get an education in PR, and that's what I'm using now.
So, what turned your attention towards PR and made you think that, this is what I want to do in life?
I always had a really big interest in the social and behavioral sciences. I really like sociology, criminology, psychology, how human brains work, what makes people tick, how to get people to change their perception and do what you want them to do was always of interest to me. So when I was finally, forced to specialize and pick a final study, I settled on PR because it came out of a school that focused more on the behavioral science than any other part of PR, which is why it's a BS in public relations instead of a BA. But it did mean I had to dabble a bit in the old Edward Bernays style, like behavior, Sigmund Freud areas of PR, which are interesting places to go. But to be fair, it does work for a reason.
I'm absolutely. I think all of us are part counselors and part diplomats. Yeah. So, what gets you to stay in PR? You've been in the industry for quite some time now. And I believe the industry also has changed. You've seen it through, from the US to New Zealand. And I'm sure your experiences have taken you to interact with PR in other countries as well. What keeps you in PR? What is so fascinating about it?
It's an engaging industry. I get to work with a lot of technology people, and by proxy, that means crazy entrepreneurs, which is a lot of fun. You can get some weird briefs and some weird problems to solve. And if it's a problem I can sink my teeth into, I remain very engaged and very interested. And that's how I keep things going in my head, at least.
Awesome. So what happened? How did you get around to creating your own agency? Because while working in PR is one thing, but entrepreneurship plus PR is, I think, a deadly combination, right? So how did the journey start?
Um,
Tell me
I
a
guess
little more about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely lucky in the fact that I started out in New Zealand in an agency, uh, while kind of cutting my teeth here in this industry, which is very generalist. No one comes here and says, I do branding. You have to be able to do everything or you don't get a job here. It's too small of a market. But the point is I started in an agency, eventually got a shoulder tap from Samsung New Zealand, of all people, to build their PR program, which I did. Uh, Left that place, but got really valuable in-house knowledge. It taught me a lot about dealing with really big budgets, big personalities and talent, and managing that, I think, is a diplomatic way of saying it. And then again, I moved after Samsung to other agencies, including an outdoor advertising agency, and just sort of, moved about the cabin, so to speak. But how I got into owning a piece of a PR company was quite simple. The first guy I worked with, Alan Botica, the Botica Butler Raudon, said, Fred, I want you to come back. How would you like to own some of the company? And he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I handed over my check and I joined the team. And that's,
Awesome.
yeah. And now I'm learning about how to manage a small business, which is an art in and of itself.
Awesome. So, before we get into the topic of the day, what help me understand what is the PR industry like in your country?
Like I said, it's quite generalist. It does
Right.
have segments.
Mhm.
There's corporate comms, which is more my specialty, reputation management, issues management, the big picture PR.
Right.
And there's also quite a strong and thriving consumer PR practice in this country as well. The people that look after, fast-moving consumer goods and whatnot. But no matter what side you're working on, you tend to have capabilities across all the tools. You have to have a basic understanding of strategy. You have to be able to put together a campaign document. Like the generalism here is quite significant.
Right.
Um, but it also means that if you work with someone from New Zealand and you have a crazy thing you need to do on some crazy platform, they tend to go, oh, okay, sure, because you have to.
Right. So, what about your agency? What is it? What is it like? What do you specialize in, or generalize in? What are the kind of clients that you handle? Tell me a little bit more about your agency.
We have a core business focus in tech and corporate PR. So we look after a lot of the big kind of tech giants out of the US, Intel, SAP, granted that's Germany, Norton LifeLock. So a lot of the big tech companies form the core of our business. We also have a corporate comms and financial communications chunk that probably makes up another 20 or 30% of the business. Um, and we also have an offshoot brand called Passion PR that we handle corporate clients with, but it's a very small part of what we do. It's more something to support our corporate clients than something that stands on its own.
And where does political PR fit into all of this?
So that's a good question. And I mentioned this to you just earlier, which is politics in New Zealand isn't like politics in other places. There's not a lot of money in it. If we were to specialize in political PR, I wouldn't have any employees or an office. It's really hard to I guess make a significant and regular piece of money out of political PR. On the other hand, we do help aspiring politicians at times, and we do help fix problems when someone might say something they shouldn't out loud.
Really, that's fascinating considering the vibrancy of the political environment and political communication that we hear out of your country. One would assume that political PR is a very, very strong vertical, maybe attracting a lot of new talent, but that's surprising to hear.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It just needs to be tweaked a little bit for New Zealand, as everything in New Zealand has its own sort of spin. Um,
Right.
for example, campaign donations, which are one of the primary ways a campaign can make money and then pay people with that money, are almost more of a problem than a benefit for people. Any donation over, I think it's $10,000 right now, needs to be flagged and entered into the public record. If you try to, for example, and this happened recently, and it all spilled out into the press, make three $9,000 donations, like it's going to get found out. It's really hard to gain anything by donating money to a campaign, because beyond handing over the check, the political individual on the other side doesn't necessarily feel any great need to give back to you, or help you achieve whatever policy outcome you were trying to get at. It just doesn't work that way here.
Okay, so what you're describing to me is very intriguing because I believe your parliamentary democracy is very different from other democratic countries. Before we get started on political PR and start talking about policies and strategy, can you help us understand how it's different in your country? Because I believe it will help in context.
Okay, and this is sorry, you broke up a moment there, but you want me to explain MMP? Okay. So MMP is an interesting little system. What it does is it requires political parties to come together into some sort of consortium or partnership to govern. If you can get over 50% of the vote, then you can govern alone. If you don't get over 50% of the vote, then it's up to the parties to talk amongst each other, and whether that's very small minor parties that have picked up 8%, or very large parties that may have picked up 38, 40, or even 45%, to find a way to cross that 50% threshold. Because once that conglomerate of people do, they have the right to govern. It doesn't matter if the other team was the single largest vote winner. If the other people have formed a consortium to beat them out, they have the right to govern, to pick the prime minister, and to set their policy agenda and then see that through in however they see fit. You do still have to go through the regular, votes and tallies of normal parliamentary procedure. But the way the government is formed is quite interesting here. It blew my mind when I first wrapped my head around it too.
It must have been a big surprise to you when you from the USA and figured out that this is how the political scenario works in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's quite refreshing actually, because it's and I hate to say it this way, it's a very well functioning system. So.
Awesome. So what is the media like in your country, and what is political reporting like?
Let's start with the media. So journalism in New Zealand is quite fair. It's quite open. Journalists aren't going to provide you with a list of the questions ahead of time, no matter how many times you ask. They're going to ask the questions they want. They're going to demand answers to those questions. So it is, sort of like how you see it in the movies, the way it's supposed to be, the ideal journalistic setup. Does money get involved? Did someone spend a whole lot of advertising dollars so they think they get special treatment? I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but you just don't see it regularly. It is quite a upfront, honest, and with a lot of integrity, a good system. Yeah, journalists here treat politicians very well. And in return, the politicians also are pretty open and transparent with the journalists in return. What was the second you wanted me to talk about?
So that's very refreshing to hear. I also wanted to understand, what is the media landscape like?
That's
for example, in India, we have thousands of newspapers, hundreds of channels and radio stations, and not to mention the millionth online website that we have. What is it like in your country?
It reminds me of a story. I once reported back to a client of ours in China that we got seven like really good pieces of coverage, and they went 100, and I went no, 7. Which is actually a really good result here. There's 4 major players, and they've all been beaten pretty badly by social media giants. Like we're feeling the same pressures as everyone else out there when it comes to journalists, and the media landscape shrinking and just not having enough advertiser dollars to really support its infrastructure, especially the really kind of remote local news outposts. We're not quite into the news deserts that America is feeling, but it is hurting over here. There are some interesting things happening. Yeah. For example, one publication over here, it's called Stuff. It used to be owned by Fairfax. hosted a managed buyout, and now the editor and the entire staff of the paper are the shareholders. So it's quite an interesting take, and hopefully it works because more power to him for trying something big.
That's fascinating. So when you come to politics, how does it function in your country? And since you have been in different countries as such, how is it different when from as compared to US or compared to India?
Um, Political PR here is quite fair, like I was saying. Like everyone treats each other with respect. We also, and I know this is a problem in other places, do have a singular set of facts that we call reality, and we work from there. If you don't, you're actually going to get quite a lot of pushback from the journalist, and they may even cut you off entirely and kick you out of the studio, which happened to one of our parties that was very much in line with QAnon.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. A lovely journalist named Tova O'Brien said, "No, we're not giving you a platform for that garbage. You can get out." It was wonderful. So yeah, it's nice here. But
No
anyway,
TRP, no
excuse me.
TRP, no clickbaits, no views. Isn't that what the media is concerned about?
Oh, we still have plenty of that, but when it comes to how political reporting is done, it is pretty right down the middle. We don't have a Fox News over here, so to speak. We definitely have some people who lean further to the right and further to the left, but it's all rather centrist. Yeah. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So, it sounds amazing. The kind of journalist that you would have would actually throw somebody out because they don't believe in their ideology or they assume that they are not, not in the interest of the public. It's amazing to see that, that kind of journalism still exists. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And I think one of the reasons it happens that way is proximity over here.
Right.
We have a thing here called 2 degrees. It's actually a telecommunications organization took it as their name because in most places they say there's 6 degrees of separation from any other human. In New Zealand, it's 2. Everybody knows each other. And what that means is you have such proximity to any political figure or journalist. If you pick up a phone and you want to call the political editor from the New Zealand Herald, our largest paper, you'll get them. They'll just answer the phone. If you call the press office of your local politician, you'll get their press secretary more than likely. But you will be a human, and it will be one step away from being put on the actual phone with the politician. That's not how things normally work. I was jogging just behind my offices over here. There's a mountain. And I ran up the mountain and I was running next to Clark Gayford, who is the prime minister's husband. Like everything is smushed together in this country and the proximity and access is massive. So you don't have to deal with the gatekeeper. So it's a lot cleaner here than in most countries, especially the US.
It sounds amazing. What you're describing to me sounds like a very idealistic society to live in. And I'm sure it'll be because coming from the world of PR, we see all the what's and whatnots and everything, right? You get a peek behind the scenes, and sometimes it's not so pretty. Sometimes it's great to be working with somebody who's trying to change the world, but a lot of
Yeah.
times it's not pretty. But what you're describing to me sounds like a very ideal situation and quite fascinating and refreshing. So
Yeah.
let's get down to case studies, right? I believe that there have been a lot of different developments that's happening in your country as well. But I want to understand from you, your biggest crisis management case study in this segment.
Ooh, that I've worked on because I can't. Unfortunately, I'm more of a consultant that works behind the scenes on these sorts of things. There's not much I can actually talk about, but there are some interesting things that have happened in politics I could discuss. Which way
Okay,
you
let's
want
go
to
with that. Let's go with that. I'd love to hear about something that you worked on, but if there are confidentiality clauses there, that's fine. We can generalize it if you like, but I would want to hear about at least one case study that you've worked on.
go? Okay. Well, um, on occasion, people say things that they shouldn't
Right.
to a journalist, and then perhaps say things like, You know that was off the record, correct? After the fact,
There's a
which
lot of, I think there's a lot of redacted stuff there.
yeah, yeah. Either way, if you did say something that was inflammatory and you did want to save your campaign and you called me, I tend to give advice and recommendations on how to A, apologize, and B, how and where to apologize and in what manner. We don't ever let people get away with saying, I'm sorry for how you feel. Because as we all know, that's not an apology. It's, I'm sorry that I did this. And to be fair, usually when those apologies happen, it's from people who have not made a career of apologizing. So that tends to be a place that I specialize in. But yeah, again, I can't name names there. But if you say the right thing to the right people, there's usually a lot of forgiveness there. So getting it out across the airwaves and reaching your target audiences with a good apology can actually have a lot of value for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, that was a very, blank.
Sorry, I
Okay.
have to go that way.
I get that. So tell me about some a very specific case study with names, with examples that have caught your eye. A case study, a possible case study that you have seen in your country and said, okay, this is an interesting way of handling this. That was a smart move.
Okay, well, why don't we just talk about the coronavirus then? I mean, one thing from a political standpoint that's happened in New Zealand that was very strong is that our prime minister and our central government took a very strong role in the rollout of coronavirus messaging and the tactics the nation was going to use to tackle the pandemic. They were very clear from the beginning that our strategy is going to be an elimination strategy. We're not going to try to manage it within our borders. We're going to try to stamp it out and get it out and keep it out. It's work. There's a reason I'm sitting in my boardroom and just outside my office, there's 4 or 5 other people milling around the office. There's no social distancing. We don't need to be doing those things here because we've got a good situation. And that's again because the political nature of the original COVID messaging was tackled well by the government. It wasn't an us versus them situation. We're all in it together. We're a team of 5 million. Those were the sorts of things you were hearing come from the Labour Party. They listened to scientists. They were very open about listening to scientists and saying, this is what best practice looks like. And again, when other political parties came to attack them saying it's not the right strategy, it's not the way you should be doing things, they took a very, how do I say this? A very data-driven and a very apolitical line in fighting back. So it wasn't about us or them, it was about the virus and us beating the virus together. Prime Minister Ardern, I'm not too sure if you know this, but she's actually a communications person. She's got a comms degree. Definitely led the charge and helped us all get a singular set of information, facts, and guidance, and then roll that out. And whether that was from the district health boards, which are the big regional places, or your local general practitioners, your little family doctors and whatnot, she got everyone singing from the same song sheet. And it didn't matter what other political parties were saying, all the crazy, masks are just muscling our freedoms kind of stuff. It never even broke through here, even though people did try. So from a political standpoint, they really got the nation behind them, and through good governance kept the nation on its feet, which is why they just won a landslide victory. They could have governed alone after the most recent election because people trust them. They built a reputation, they built their trust, and it was all through political communication.
It's brilliant. The world watched as this entire thing unfolded in your country, and it was amazing. It set a new bar. So I'll be remiss if I don't ask you this question. Your Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has set a new bar in political communication. Now that you tell me she's a communications professional, it makes a lot of sense. But how much of this would you credit to her PR team, the entire, way that this has been handled? or the entire imagery that has been created about how governance is done in New Zealand, not just in your country, but all over the world? How much of it would you credit to the PR team?
Um, Quite a lot. I mean, they were the pointy end of the spear, right? They led the charge, they established the messages, and they made sure that the trickle down effect of that message was really well followed. I don't know if I can put a percentage on it because so many people were working tirelessly. I know quite a few of them. Down in Wellington at the Beehive, a lot of people contributed to the outcomes we're having here right now. But stable leadership and a really good, I guess, person at the top that just forced everyone into line also really helped.
It does. It does. I think strong leadership makes a lot of sense. So, let's move away a little bit from the way things run in your country, right? On an overall perspective, ethics, transparency, truth on one end, and politics on the other. They're not really known to be best friends. Your take on this, and how do you think this has changed or evolved around the country?
Um, it's hard because I have a foot in both camps, right? I'm American and I'm also a Kiwi citizen
Yes.
as well.
Hence the
Uh,
question.
yeah, oh, that's a tough one. I would say here in New Zealand, because it is such a small place and there is so much access, you can't really hide. If you lie, if you tell untruths, if you embellish the truth, it's going to come out eventually. They will find it because the investigative journalists here are quite sharp. Um, so yeah, there's a high degree of trust um, within the nation and a high degree of people playing by the rules because you pretty much have to. It's not to say dodgy things don't happen, but when they do, like you can pretty much guarantee it's going to spill out into the paper and it's going to get ugly. Um, yeah, which is the thing about political donations I was saying earlier. The second you dabble with those, and some dodgy property developer dropped $30,000 into your account, it just gets ugly, and people talk about it. And whether it was perfectly harmless or not, it still makes it in the news. Whereas if you look at my other home country, things are a little different. There's places to hide. There are new networks entirely dedicated to um, alternative facts, as someone has said. You have your facts, ours are alternative. Because anyway, the point is that here your ethics, your reputation, what you stand for is intricately tied to your day-to-day life. Whereas on the other side of the ditch, having a different set and a different reality and a different set of facts to play from, you can run directly into the arms of welcoming humans who also believe the same thing, that the earth is not warming and is entirely flat, and that the Messiah will be down tomorrow to escort the new president out of the building. Like, it just, you find welcoming communities over there, whereas here it's not nearly that bad, which is why I guess I'm trying to say that New Zealand's a pretty good place to talk to a politician because you're usually talking to someone who's being honest and meaningful.
Absolutely, but it's fascinating, but I'm curious. Do you think you'd be able to identify, let's say, the tipping point on how all of this changed? Because I believe, even in this country, um, things must have been similar to what it was in the US or Asia or Europe at some point of time, right? But there must have been one tipping point that said, people must have said that, this is the way we will function. And I think media and communication have a huge role to play. Have a huge role to play in the way people function because they are largely, I think, responsible for showcasing the way things are and the way things should be, right? Do you think there is a tipping point that you could identify for us?
Um, I've been in New Zealand for 15 years.
Right.
It's always been pretty good, and to be fair, I'm not great on the history of New Zealand politics. I sort of know what's happened over the last decade and a half. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, as far as tipping points are concerned, I'm sorry, I really don't know. Yeah. It's not
The,
like the US where I can point to Nixon and say that's when things really went bad. Um, it's pretty much always been, it's very equalitarian over here. And I know it's been
Mhm.
that way. It's sort of built into the soul of the country. And every human here believes that they need to pull their own weight and, be and make their own way to a degree. It's like 1950s America in that aspect. But yeah, but I don't know about a tipping point. Sorry.
No, no, that's all right. I just thought I'd ask, right? So, in the last year has been pretty much a game changer for a lot of industries, right?
Yeah.
What do you think has been a good game changer for the political PR vertical in your country last year? Has there been
It,
anything that's happened for the good?
oh, for the good, yeah. I think the biggest thing that happened, and it probably does somewhat link to US politics, is voter turnout. Voter turnout in the US and in New Zealand were at record highs this year, or at least highs not seen for quite some times from a percentage basis. The fact that people are engaged, excited, and want to understand how the levers of power are worked right now is wonderful. When I went to high school, I actually had civics class. They don't teach that in New Zealand, but people have actually started talking about it. Why don't we teach kids how government works, how politics works, how to read the paper, how to be a functioning member of society, and how to, if you want to, get into government. Um, the fact that people are that engaged right now gives me a lot of hope and promise.
It does, and I think that'll be another step up in the kind of society that you guys are creating out there. Okay, so I'm going to get towards your experience of last year, right?
Okay.
What have been your biggest learnings and your biggest learnings that you will take with you to this year from 2020?
I hate talking about 2020, just so you know.
Okay, so let's talk about 2021, right? Let's
But
talk
the
about
last,
2021.
okay, I actually have some notes on this. Let me
Okay.
see if we can find them. Um, I would say the first thing to do is make a decision to marry a Kiwi girl 15 years ago and move to New Zealand. That's the best way to 2021. Um, beyond that, I would say, here we go. Well, I guess I'm gonna dabble in giving advice and unrequested advice here. What to take into 2021. Um, you got to roll with the punches no matter where you are. There's a lot of economic uncertainty, and I think that's one of the main drivers for anyone out there owning an agency. You don't know when someone's going to fall over and not pay the bill. And you don't know when an account might go south, and it won't be your fault, but the company may have had to make some really hard choices. So yeah, be prepared and maybe have a little something in reserve. It's part of what I'm taking in. On a more positive note, I think I'm taking into 2021 new tools. So whether it's actually getting a TikTok account or getting on Clubhouse, that's probably the next step, because while I know what they are, I know how to recommend them, I know how they operate and function, I don't actually have accounts. I'm not part of the community. And the best way to be, I guess, an expert at any particular tool is to actually use it. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. See, okay. I'm. Do you have a TikTok account?
I don't have a TikTok account, no. No, my daughter wants one desperately, but I've said no. She's only 9.
Okay. That caught me off guard. I guess, so how has your agency evolved to meet these challenges? Since, I'm sure that the year that we will not name presented a fair set of challenges for you too. And these are the learnings that you're taking with you this year. But has your agency evolved or pivoted in any way to be able to have met those challenges?
Yeah, there's a lot of upskilling. Um, you have to
TikTok,
meet people. Yeah, more than TikTok. Clubhouse. I'm still waiting for an invite if anyone has one. But Yeah, knowing where your audience is a big
Mhm.
challenge, and it's fragmented like anywhere else.
Hmm.
So I'm feeling on all the social media platforms, all the new tools, and to a degree, marketing tools, which is HubSpot
Right.
or Salesforce. Understanding the digital tools that are available and having in-house knowledge, not leaving it to other consultants that are going to charge you more than you're charging yourself. To understand and know and be able to use those tools is really important, and that also has a bit of a trickle down effect. It needs to be driven from the top,
Right.
but you also need your staff to understand it too. But that's how we evolve. We always stay abreast of whatever's happening, and whatever we need to be using.
Absolutely, and I think that's the best way to go. So let's come to agency owners. Since PRBI is a network of 40 boutique agencies from across the world, what would be your top three advice for agency owners in 2021?
Got more notes on this one. Hang on.
Okay.
Okay, number one, working from home. So
Yes.
working from home is a reality now, right? We all know it, and at some point in time, me and a lot of other people out in the world had to just let go. We
Mm.
had to we had to trust. We had to find a way to
Right.
go. I've known you for a long time. You've worked for me for over a year. Just work from home. I'm not going to check in on you. I trust that the work is happening. Um, but at the same time, I think that was enabled by years and years of face-to-face interactions. So the way I see work from home happening for all of us out there, it's going to be a hybrid model. It's going to be a few days in the office, talking to people, engaging in conversations, hitting the water cooler or the coffee machine together. And anyway, I just think that's going to be a reality moving forward. The second thing that I think PR companies need to really consider, and I mentioned it a bit earlier, is just workflows and cash flows are going to have peaks and valleys. 2021 is not going to be that different from 2020. So again, if a client calls you up and says we're cutting PR, it may feel like a bad decision on their part, but they could have had global shipping issues may have stopped them from getting stock to all of their stores in the nation.
Right.
And that's an operational problem that PR can't solve. So
Right.
you just have to understand there's going to be some blips this year, and yeah, have a little something in reserve if you need to get over a few months. And the third thing I'd say is, well, how do I say this?
Just say it.
Expect, yeah. um, just
We're all good.
understand that
We can handle it.
stressed. People are stressed. People are
Yeah.
fraying at the edges, and whether that's your clients or your own staff, there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's playing havoc with people's heads. Just
Right.
a little bit of compassion is going to go a long way this year. So just be nice and be kind.
Absolutely. It never hurts to be nice. It never hurts to be kind to people. Yeah. Okay. So, top three skills that you want PR professionals to have, let's say, when they come and apply for a job to you.
Okay. So first of all, don't. And if there's anyone in New Zealand watching this, don't come up to me and ask me for a job in fashion PR. That's a pet peeve of mine, and all it tells me is that you have no idea who I am or what my company does. So, yeah, if you're looking for a job, that's rule number one. Rule number two is understand again all the digital tools that are out there. Perhaps brush up on what a strategy is, because it's a question that we ask in every interview. What's a strategy? And you'd be surprised how many people can't answer that. Part two, understand, that writing is such a critical part of this job. Like you have to be able to write. If you talk to us about grammar, that's really great. If you talk to us about how you read the news and how you see typos in the New Zealand Herald, like even better, because it happens all the time. But the fact is talk about writing as well. So anyway, understand strategies, good writing, and maybe research the company where you're applying a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would you want to add a little more about, let's say, for professionals who are entering the industry this year?
Yeah, that was it. That was the recommendation, just there. Well, I guess one other thing then, if you're entering this year, is that there are a lot of graduates out there. Um,
Right.
and I know it's an issue globally where universities are churning out tons and tons of communication degrees. And for example, in the Auckland area alone, there'll be about 300 graduates for 30 jobs. So just understand you need to find a way to stand out and be better than the rest.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, I'm sure you've had your fair share of failures and success in PR. Uh, we're running out of time, so I'm gonna, ask you the last three questions. So, what has failure and success taught you?
Um,
Because I believe, sorry to continue in it, PR on a daily basis, you're either on a, it's like a seesaw, right? On you can actually be on a high in the mornings and down in the dumps in the afternoons. I know it sometimes sounds very esoteric out there, but yeah, that's how it is. But what has this being on this seesaw taught you?
I'd say the overwhelming lesson I've learned is demand a seat at the table. You know, PR has an
Yes.
absolute place on boards.
Yes.
Communications has an absolute place in discussions with the C-suite. Every
Right.
time I've had really good success, it's because I've had access to the people at the top. I can talk to the CEO and say, this is a bad idea because when I haven't had that seat, it's led to the failures. When you tell the marketing manager who has been in the job for 2 years because his father gave it to him, that this is a bad idea, you never know if that information is going to funnel up and they're going to go ahead and do something silly. Um, Having a seat at the table and talking to the right person at the top will will absolutely deliver better results. And that's
Absolutely.
just, yeah. So if you're not talking to the right person, make sure you find a way to do so.
Yeah, that's a very good insight to share. And how has PRBI been for you?
I love PRBI. Great organization, good people. I love
Just
the chat room.
hold on. Can I ask you to repeat that again?
Uh, PR is wonderful. Our PRBI is wonderful. It's a really great organization, and the people inside of it are delightful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And last question for the day. If you were to go back, right, 20 years from now, go back in time and share some advice with your younger self, what would it be?
Uh, Value my time. I spent a lot of my early and mid PR career going, it was just 5 minutes or 10 minutes on the phone. I'm not going to bill them for that. And that all definitely changed a while back when I took a ride with my accountant. Uh, I said, do you want to share a cab? Because they were leaving at the same time. So I paid for the cab because I was already going there. And when they hopped in the cab, we talked about work and he billed me for it. Yeah, but
Really?
this is how lawyers and accountants think. If they're on the clock, they're on the clock. They're dispensing advice, counsel, and good guidance. You need to pay for that. And that's the way I think every PR professional needs to start valuing their time. Because there's an issue amongst, I think, all of us for not putting that value on our own work and making people, pay for it. So anyway, just a pet peeve of mine.
Awesome. It's amazing. I think the PR industry can learn a lot from the legal industry, the way they build time, like you mentioned, and it would be fascinating. It would be amazing if all of us could do that. But that's very valid advice. Have 20 years later, have you been able to do that?
Maybe. Most of the time I on occasion, I still go, whatever. But that's usually if it's leading to greener pastures, if you know what I mean.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us today. It was absolutely delightful to have this conversation with you today.
No problem. I wish we could have talked more about actual political campaigning, but that's okay. I may have waffled a bit. Sorry, but I hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So that was Fred sharing insights on political PR and a lot about how his agency and how he has been working in PR and the learnings that he has had. And yeah, so we'll see you again for in the next session, and with another interesting conversation with another PRBI member from across the globe. Till then, you can view all our live sessions on Facebook and on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions for any of our experts, then drop us a note in the comment section and we will answer them for you. Thank you.